This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
I'm your host, Cleon Wall, where we tackle the biggest storylines on and off the field in the Big 12 Conference. Rivalries were renewed in Week 2, and one of the conference favorites goes down to an SEC team. In fact, rivalries will be kind of the theme this week, so let's get to our top 5 storylines in the conference.
Number 5.
Thanks, new voiceover guy. We begin with Rice University taking on Houston in Space City. Now, this rivalry is not one of the oldest. They started playing each other in 1971 when Houston joined the Southwest Conference. The Cougs won the very first matchup 23-21. Rice won the second game 14-13 in 1972. Since then, the Cougars have dominated, never losing more than 2 games in a row. They won again last Saturday, 35-9, and are now 35-12 all-time against the Owls. Jeremy Branham, the radio voice of the Cougars basketball team, and the host of ESPN 97.5's The Killer Bees radio show, join me on his drive to work to talk about the rivalry and the rushing attack. Crosstown or in-state or interstate rivals can be fairly bitter, much like Missouri and Kansas. Give us an idea of what this Houston-Rice rivalry is like since they're in the same city.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's historic. They haven't shared a conference too often. They have in the past. They go way back, Southwest Conference, Conference USA. The history of it is long. The future of it, I don't know how long it will be. There's talk that, maybe this game doesn't get played for a little while. Does Houston want to go to Rice, a Big 12 school, to an American Conference school on a semi-consistent basis? So the future of it, I think, is a little bit murky, which maybe is big winning the last one in the foreseeable future. But it is, the closest rivalry in football, bowl, subdivision, all that. It's like 4 miles away. There's it's a healthy rivalry. I wouldn't stack it up to those other ones, though, if I'm being completely honest.
Running back Dean Connors, he's a former Rice Owl. He explodes for 132 yards of the team's 207 rushing yards. I know we're only a few weeks into the season, but is he the guy moving forward? Is he your main guy on the rushing attack?
No, I think that they want to mix in some guys there. Stacey Steed, somebody they're going to use. Burnett, somebody who got a good healthy usage in Week 1 against SFA and then was injured and unavailable for Rice. They're hopeful that he plays against Colorado. So I don't think they're going to take the bell cow approach. I think you'll see Connors for sure, but I think he'll share the backfield with Burnett and then to a lesser extent Stacey Sneed. But yeah, going to his old team, his old stadium there at Rice, and having that big of a game was something that he was excited about. The team was excited about for him, and it gave him gave the offense too the pick me up that it needed after a pretty slow start.
Cougs quarterback Connor Wigman played 3 seasons at Texas A&M before transferring to Houston. He didn't put up really amazing numbers, but he did have a 74-yard TD pass to Stephon Johnson against the Owls. What's his next leap in Willie Fritz's offense?
I think more of the consistency. You mentioned the deep pass, the control of the offense, that sort of thing. I think it's doing it every snap. And it's not only him. That's the offensive line protecting. That's the receivers getting separation. That's a good running game, which puts the defense on their heels a little bit. So, but I would point to the consistency. He didn't play all of last season. He got injured, hurt his right shoulder. Didn't play for about the second half of last year. So last week was his first game in a long time. And you can see a little bit of that rust. So the consistency for me is what I think will take his game to that next level. And for the Cougars to have a really good year, he's going to have to be really good.
What is a reasonable expectation for Willie Fritz in year 2 as head coach of the Cougars?
That's an interesting question because it kind of depends on who you ask. You look at Willie Fritz's career, the second year at places, he's been really, really good. His win percentage in the second year of all of his stops have been very, very high. He hadn't done that in the Big 12. They've been other conferences, but maybe that's relative. 4 games last year. It's been a little while since the program went to a bowl. So if you're kind of glass half full, glass half empty, I guess you could view it a few different ways. I think going to a bowl game would be a tremendous year two. Now that would be a lesser win percentage than Willie's had in his second year at all these stops. But you go 4 wins in year one, at least 6 wins in year two. You get to a bowl game, you're building some momentum. I'd have a tough time, and of course context matters. You know, if you start 6-0 and then you lose your last 6, it's a little bit different. But I think going to a bowl game would be a very good year two for Willie.
Number 4.
Another Southwest Conference rivalry renewed between Baylor and SMU. They played every year until the conference dissolved and Baylor joined the Big 12. Since that time, they've played 6 games, and Baylor has come out on top in each game, including a 48-45 come-from-behind victory in Dallas this past weekend. The Bears scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to tie it up and send it to overtime. Connor Hawkins' 27-yard field goal won it in the second OT. It looks like Baylor still needs a little work on defense like we talked about last week with Ashley Hodge.
Number 3.
The Cy-Hawk Trophy was on the line when Iowa traveled to Jack Trice Stadium to take on Iowa State. Kicker Kyle Conradi nails a 54-yard field goal to win it for the Cyclones. Tyler Carter of the B-LEAV and Iowa State podcast was at the game in Ames.
Tyler, paint the picture of everything leading up to that game-winning kick and what it was like when that ball went through the uprights.
Wow. Well, I mean, Iowa had all the momentum in the third quarter. If you're not really familiar with the way Iowa plays football, Iowa had like a soul-sucking 9-minute drive where it's just a death by 1,000 cuts, and luckily they only kicked the field goal to tie at 13-13. And you know, there was at that point there was like 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So I mean, Rocco, there's nobody in this world who I want more than Rocco Beck as our quarterback. So there was actually 2 key plays in the drive going up to the field goal. It was sort of like a lucky bounce. So it was a third down play. Rocco was throwing the ball. The ball got tipped at the line by one of their defensive linemen, and then they got tipped out of one of the hands of Xavier Townsend. It bounced up in the air, and our tight end was there to catch it in his hands. Everybody was going crazy because once I saw it, it was just like slow motion in my head because there were so many times in this game in the past where it could have been an interception, and I was going insane. And then as we talked about in the K-State game, we talked about that pop pass that they used. They used that play again on 3rd down and 2. The genius play calling of Taylor Mauser, and I think it's just like the trust that Matt Campbell has with Kyle Conradi. Obviously, he trusted them to make that 63-yarder last week against South Dakota, but man, in a pressure situation, just curtains again. And another spot in the Cy-Hawk game, to a 54-yard field goal. I was like, man, I really, really hope he makes it because I really don't want to go to overtime. And he drained it, and the stadium just absolutely went nuts.
I'm afraid that if it would have gone to overtime, it would have been a lot of field goals kicked. I don't know. This game is crazy. It's always close. I believe, if I have this right, 11 of the last 15 games has been decided by 1 score or less. What is it about this game in which it usually turns into a low-scoring, kind of ugly affair? And I got this feeling you're going to blame Iowa for these low-scoring games.
It really is, because Iowa it wants to muddy it up. Iowa really hasn't had, they've played the same type of offense for the last 25 years. It's ball control and play defense, run the ball. So, I mean, once it was 13-3, Iowa State wants to play a more up-tempo type of offense. Iowa wants to just sit on the ball and run the ball. Like I said, death by 1,000 cuts. So that's why, once Iowa forces you to play their game, that's usually how they win these types of games. But Iowa State, the mantra last year was playing tougher for longer, like Matt Campbell said, and that's exactly what they did in this one.
I don't want to overreact to any rivalry games, especially when you play one of your biggest rivals in Iowa. But are there some concerns with the offense right now? And I'm especially talking about the rushing attack, because I think Rocco Becht, I think he seems solid and he's a really good quarterback. But Kason Hansen is the leading rusher with 136 yards. That's only 45 yards a game. Abu Sama III is only averaging 38 yards a game. What's the deal right now with the rushing attack?
That's something that I've been thinking about too. I think it's just something that that's something that's gonna have to come during the season. I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. It just seems like they're struggling in the first half, but then the holes will open up in the second. So I really don't have a good answer for that for you. But I think it's something to look through in the upcoming weeks, especially with conference play starting.
Last season, Iowa State hammered Arkansas State at home 52-7. The Red Wolves lost to Arkansas last week 56-14. I don't think there's a lot of mystery going into this game. I just want to know why Iowa State is playing a game in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Lots of Power 4 teams refuse to play those types of games. So I'm curious why Iowa State would even agree to do this game.
I just think it's the thing that our athletic director has, where we go on the road to different group of 5 cities. That's more of a Jamie Pollard type of question, because I think in like 2028 we're going to play at Tulane, and Tulane is a good program. So like, yeah, I don't know why we would play these types of games. And obviously this is like a big letdown spot for Iowa State, especially when you consider that they're going to be a top 15 team coming into Jonesboro, Arkansas, right before a bye week. So I know the sentiment in the locker room was like, Matt Campbell's like, hey, if we want to finish this, because he does this whole thing where he does it by first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. He's like, if we want to finish this off strong, we got to show that we're mature enough, to win these types of games, because great teams win these types of games to get to the next level. So that we'll see if Iowa State can do that.
Well, Tyler, thanks a lot for joining us again. You can catch all of his stuff on the B-LEAV in Iowa State podcast. Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, guys. Go Cyclones.
Number 2.
This is our non-rivalry category. We should call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, Utah and Texas Tech beat up on some hapless teams and still look like a few of the best teams in the conference. Those two teams face off against one another on September 20th. The bad, Ohio upsets West Virginia 17-10, which could make the Mountaineer faithful restless, but it's only game 2 in Rich Rodriguez's second go-around. Then again, there's the backyard brawl with Pitt this weekend. Yikes. Then there was Kansas State, who was up on Army 21-14 at the end of the third quarter. They gave up 10 points in the fourth quarter and lost 24-21. Natives are probably getting restless in Manhattan after the past couple of weeks. The ugly, Oklahoma State loses to Oregon 69-3. I don't think I need to say any more. Then there was the it looked ugly, almost turned out good, but ended up bad. And that's Arizona State's loss at Mississippi State. The defending Big 12 champs were down 17-0 at the half, score 20 straight points, then lose in the last 2 minutes on a Bulldogs 58-yard touchdown pass. Anthony Totri of the PHNX Sun Devils podcast talked to me about how they got back in the game and the potential bounce back against UT San Antonio.
Anthony, in the season preview, you talked about Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson, but it was the running attack that got the Sun Devils back into the game against Mississippi State. Kyson Brown led the team in rushing in week 1. Raleek Brown led your rushing attack in week 2 with 110 yards, and Kanye Udo was not far behind with 105 yards rushing. None of these guys are Cam Scadaboo, but give us an idea of what this running back room is like.
Yeah, none of them are Cam Scadaboo, but I think with the fact that you have three very dynamic and different running backs, almost can allow Arizona State's offense to try and replace the production that they had from Cam Scadaboo a season ago. I mean, you mentioned Raleek Brown, Kanye Udo, both going over the century mark against Mississippi State. I imagine Kyson Brown would have had a hefty load as well if he didn't tweak his ankle pretty early on in that game. But with all three of these guys, they present different challenges to opposing defenses. Kanye Udo is typically your short yardage, maybe third down guy because he does have some elite size at running back. You have Raleek Brown, one of the most explosive players maybe in this conference, a former wide receiver at USC. And then you have Kyson Brown that can kind of do it all. So fully expect Arizona State to start taking advantage of the running back room, because it's something that definitely hurt them, specifically in the first half against Mississippi State, where it did feel like it was all on Sam Leavitt's arm.
Speaking of Sam Leavitt, he only had 82 yards passing in the game, 2 interceptions. Coach Kenny Dillingham blamed himself for not getting Sam into a rhythm. What do you think he's going to do to get Leavitt back in that groove against Texas State?
I think, in all honesty, it starts with those running backs. I think you have to start to establish the run and really open up this offense with the play action pass. It's something that Kenny Dillingham has done just about at every stop. If you go back and look at the offenses at Florida State, at Auburn, at Memphis, everywhere that he's gone, they have had a very, very elite ground attack, and you saw it last year for Arizona State. They were able to give the ball to Cam Scadaboo, and it really, really kept that defense honest and allowed Sam Leavitt to really see the field that it opened up for him. I would expect Arizona State to go to the ground game against Texas State, allow Sam Leavitt to really get comfortable in this offense early on in the game, establish a rhythm, and I think from there, when Arizona State is playing the ground attack plus what they can do with Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson, I think that's when they're one of the most dangerous offenses in this conference.
The Sun Devils defense only gave up 1 touchdown in the second half. It just so happened to be the game-winning score. Texas State scored 52 and 43 points so far this season. They're also giving up around 31 points in their 2 victories over Eastern Michigan and UTSA. Is the defense up for the challenge against the Bobcats team that challenged ASU last year in San Marcos?
Yeah, I think when you look at this Arizona State defense, there were pretty hefty expectations going in with 10 of 11 returning starters from that CFP team just a year ago. And I think, again, you look at just the recent performance against Mississippi State. Overall, this defense did a really, really solid job. You remove that go-ahead score at the end of the game, which I know completely changes everything. But overall, this defense played really, really well, especially when it comes to the run defense. If they can make Texas State a one-dimensional team, which UTSA and the other opponent for Texas State haven't necessarily been able to do, then I think this one definitely bodes well for Arizona State. And I think there's a reason the books have ASU as a 2-touchdown favorite in this one.
Anthony Totri from the PHNX Sun Devils podcast. Thanks for joining us on Big Stories.
Appreciate the time as always.
Number 1.
Our top storyline was Kansas and Missouri playing the Border Showdown once more. This rivalry ended when Mizzou left the Big 12 to join the SEC. Doggone conference realignment. But they let bygones be bygones and added 4 games starting this year. Unfortunately for Kansas fans, they will have to wait until next year to see if they can get their first win in the series since 2008. Missouri won 42-31. We wanted to check up on the land of Lawrence to see how the Jayhawk faithful are doing, so we tapped the expertise of Derek Johnson of the Locked On Jayhawks podcast.
Derek, the Jayhawks take on the Tigers for the first time in 14 years, and it's a gut punch, 31-24 lead with over 8 minutes left in the game, only to give up 2 touchdowns and lose by a couple of scores. What's the feeling in Jayhawk land right now?
I think you're never going to feel great when you lose to your rival, and that's certainly the case here. Like you said, gut punch, like that is a perfect term to kind of describe things. It's an unfortunate loss, especially when you feel like you could have had it. Like Missouri ends up almost doubling you up in yardage. So there's certain elements you could point to and say, okay, well, Missouri deserved to win, but it's impossible to feel that way when you're leading in the fourth quarter, when they have a 4th and 7, where if you stop them, you have the lead in the ball, where if you drop a pass or you don't drop the pass, then maybe you go down and get a game-winning touchdown of your own. So that's hard. But I do think from a big picture standpoint, I think people feel pretty good about where this team is at. I think you competed on the road against a good SEC school. I think Kansas is going to be okay long term.
Where was the Jayhawks rushing attack in this game? You talked about how Missouri had way more yards than Kansas, but where was their rushing attack? Leading rusher Daniel Hinshaw only had 11 yards in this game. QB Jalen Daniels was the leading rusher in the game. Is the Jayhawks rushing attack going to be able to find its footing against the Mountaineers coming up on September 20th?
You know, it's funny because for so long, and typically under Lance Leipold, like that running game has been the bread and butter for KU. But you lost Devin Neal, who's the program's all-time leading rusher, and I think you felt that a little in this game. One of the biggest differences was honestly the running back personnel in this one. You look at offensive line rush yards, which is basically a stat that has been developed to show, you know, how much push is the offensive line getting before the running back gets contacted, basically pre-yards after contact. And Kansas was about half a yard lower than Missouri. You know, they were lower, but it wasn't as much as you would think when you see Missouri rush for over 200 yards and Kansas be shut down the way that they were. What that tells me is when you're watching the game, especially like with Missouri, they had some dudes at running back. And Daniel Hinshaw moments has been a dude for Kansas, and LaShawn Williams has had some success at Iowa before coming over to Kansas. But you missed the vision that Devin Neal and the cutting ability that he had in the offense. And I do think it'll be more of an aberration just because the long haul with Lance Leipold has told me they're going to be a good rushing attack. And also, I don't know that you're going to play as good of a defensive line as you had with Missouri. Like that might be the best team you play on the defensive line. So I think that'll help, but it is a little bit worrisome to say the least, even if other teams can't replicate the size and athleticism that Missouri has on the defensive line. It's at least a little bit of a worry for KU.
Is it good or bad that Kansas has a week off before they take on West Virginia? I'm saying that because, of course, it's always good when you have a bye because you can get healthy, prepare for the next team. On the other hand, you lose to a rival and you might be thinking to yourself, we just want to get back on the field and play again.
Yeah, I certainly think that from the fan perspective, I mean, locally, it was not a great weekend of sports. The Kansas City Chiefs, for those who are KU and Chiefs fans, they lost. KU loses to Missouri. Bobby Witt Jr., who's the Kansas City Royals superstar, he gets hurt over the weekend. So, like, it was not a great weekend for sports. I think from the fan perspective, they're like, hey, we're chomping at the bit. We need to get back into action. Like, please, more sports just to, you know, get the bad taste out of your mouth. But I do think from the team perspective, it's good for Kansas. They're already a little beat up on the season. They had a couple guys playing through injury in the Missouri game, a couple other guys who were limited and a couple other guys who were missing time. So I think that'll be really helpful headed into Big 12 play. And I do think it helps you. I think one of the toughest things is coming off a rivalry game and trying to emotionally get up that very next week for that next game. I think this helps you reset a little bit if you're Kansas, and also, you know, get prepared for West Virginia because with a new coach coming into the league, obviously, you know, he's returning with Rich Rodriguez, but it's a coach that Kansas and Lance Leipold haven't faced. It'll give them a little extra time to kind of game plan for what they want to do.
One last question about this rivalry. Missouri will play in Lawrence next season, but then they won't play again until 2031 and 2032. Is there any way we can get these two teams to figure out how to play each other every year, or maybe every other year, or at least more than 4 times between now and 2032?
If the SEC would like to invite Kansas to the league, that would certainly solve it right there. But no, in all honesty, like, I don't know. I think the tough part is, and I've always thought it was so weird that they do this, like the NFL and these professional sports, like they do their schedule, I don't know what, in like March or April before the season comes in September, and they seem to be doing just fine. Why do we have to schedule these games out in college football, 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance for some of this stuff? And then you get these schedules booked up. So it feels as if I feel like it'll get renewed, especially after I'd imagine it'll be a sellout when they come back to Lawrence. It was obviously a sellout in Columbia. I think it's going to be beneficial for both these schools to play this game, to drum up fan interest, especially in a world now where it's like very important to have sellouts and gain that revenue so you can go to paying the players with rev share. I think that it wouldn't shock me if they re-up it in some way, but yeah, I do think, that's why next year's game honestly becomes even more important, because then you get bragging rights for, the next 5 years coming into one after that. But I do think, like, if you told me, okay, they're going to renew it after 2030, 2031, 2032, and it'll happen again in the mid 2030s, I would not be surprised at all.
Derek Johnson of the Locked On Jayhawks podcast, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, you too.
Now for our big man on campus. Lots of impressive numbers out there, but we're giving it to Baylor's pass and catch team. Sawyer Robertson passed for 440 yards and 4 TDs. Wide receiver Josh Cameron had 9 catches for 151 yards and 2 TDs. And Ashton Hawkins caught 10 balls for 145 yards. Best woman on campus? How about best women on campus? The Houston soccer squad beat Army 8-0. 8 different Cougars scored, including sisters Casey and Cameron Maddox. The Backyard Brawl is coming this weekend, so coming up on Thursday's edition of Big Stories, we feature new West Virginia President Michael T. Benson. At one time, he thought he would be an athletic director. Find out more on Thursday's Big Stories. Thanks again for listening to the Big Stories podcast. Make sure you subscribe and download the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Cleon Wall. We'll be back soon. Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.